Global economic growth projections have been revised down in recent months, and the pattern of slow growth is likely to persist, with consequences for all developing economies. South Africa's GDP forecast for 2015 has also been revised down. The National Treasury projects a 2% growth in the economy in 2015, rising to 3% by 2017. The South African economy appears to be somewhere in the middle right now. We are not shooting the stars out, but nor are we collapsing. South Africans are, however, staggering under the burden of a weaker rand and high and volatile electricity costs. South African business confidence is also low, judging from the recent business surveys conducted. Economists feel that over the next 2 years, the economy will continue to bump around somewhere at the bottom.
I think this is a strong, resilient economy, and I think it's going into a downturn. It's quite a steep downturn. I suspect we actually may enter an outright recession. It's possible, especially if we have a slew of job losses. There's a lot of supply destruction that still has to take place in the mining industry. I suspect it will be focused in South Africa to a large extent. There's certainly some platinum mines that need to close, base metals mines, etc. So that's still going to happen, and that's going to feed back through into the engineering sectors, etc. And then, of course, from a tourism perspective, that sector has been put into instant recession through the visa requirements that have been slapped onto travellers coming to South Africa, and all of those factors suggest that we are actually going to face, if not a recession, certainly a much slower economy than what is comfortable.
South Africa's mining sector is in trouble as it struggles with widespread job losses and lower commodity prices following a slowdown in the world's second largest economy, China. In the past 2 months, at least 7 listed mining companies announced plans to cut thousands of jobs.
South Africa has distinctly underperformed our peers. A lot of mistakes made prior to 2008 are also being magnified in our mining industry. For instance, it was not looked after during the boom. We missed the boom, and now that we're in a downturn, the destruction that happened during that period is starting to actually manifest itself quite strongly. And so there's and it's in the downturn that you're looking for investors to carry the operations, because there's the prospect of upside. But when you revoke mining licenses at a whim or threaten things with a mining license, tenure is the most important thing. If you don't have tenure, it's much easier. Just shut the operation down, because you just don't know what your line of sight is. Mining needs a long investment timeline. We've always had a long investment timeline. That timeline is getting shorter and shorter, and so the willingness to invest in our mining industry is getting less and less. And we should be the top mining destination in the world.
The current unemployment rate in South Africa stands at 25%, while the unofficial rate is about 40%. The economy has already shed thousands of jobs in mining alone this year, and it looks like more jobs could be lost with commodity prices coming down this quickly.
We are underperforming in an enormous way. The global financial crisis hit globally. So South Africa wasn't an exception, and South Africa finds itself an exception in being one of the few emerging markets where unemployment has gone up since 2008, not down. Most other emerging markets have actually managed to see unemployment reduce further since 2008, and that's just one indication that shows an inflection point from 2008, suggesting that it's an internal problem rather than an external problem.
Tens of thousands of jobs at hundreds of companies are currently affected by retrenchment processes, and employee confidence is at a 3-year low. That is according to Trade Union Solidarity's concise report on the current retrenchment crisis released in August 2015.
Whenever there's a retrenchment, there is a valuable thing that we can get. Anytime a country has majority of its jobs in one or two sectors, it's vulnerable. It is forced to go in to diversify and to create economics in different areas and different job opportunities, and entrepreneurialism is born. And this is really what's the greatest, is having people have the courage to go out there and care enough about people to create new jobs. So I'm a firm believer. I've seen recessions, and I've seen people who sit there and go, I don't have a job, And I said, well, if you sit there and talk about how you don't have a job, instead of go out there and look around for what people need, there's always somebody does get a job if they find it. They look for it. So I don't think there's a lack of jobs. There's a lack of creativity and a lack of initiative to go out there and look for how I can serve the people out there. And I know that when there's recessions, people think, well, I don't have money. But there's creativity to go and come up with new ideas. It's new niches. Just like in an ecology, when a tree is knocked down, a whole bunch of other branches, bushes and herbs and flowers and everything come up to the surface that weren't there. That's exactly what happens in the economy. When a big company is down and they're laying people off, a whole bunch of new plants come in and they start filling in the space that's the hole. So my advice is to go and not focus on the problem, but focus on the solution. Care about human beings. I always say that if you really care about human beings, to go find out what their needs are and find creative ways of solving those needs, directly or indirectly, there's never a lack of jobs. There's a lack of initiative, there's a lack of creativity, there's a lack of taking action, but there's never a lack of job opportunities.
Labour relations in South Africa is also at an all-time low. The country has recently seen prolonged strikes, which often turned violent in both the platinum and the engineering and metal sectors. The high associated costs of these strikes have often been cited as an impediment to attracting more investment and hence creating more jobs. While some quarters of business are challenging the law itself, others feel these are symptoms of a lack of real transformation on the work front.
What I'm going to say is probably going to challenge some people, but in companies there's a tendency towards what I call androgyny. And if we get too patriarchal and we get too masculinized and we start to think of kind of a greed or a narcissism, the people that are the workers that are actually going in there and doing the services, what happens is they have to coalesce together to counterbalance that, to make sure that there's a nice distribution and a fair exchange between the workers and the employers. And so the unions are a byproduct of non-quite fair exchange. They're coming in there to protect the people. That's not necessarily always the solution. The solution is to understand that if you're running a company, you have to have engagement and fair exchange, or the unions come in to be a middleman to actually pay, you have to pay even more to. So it's wiser for the owners to get the lesson that we have to care about the people and make sure that their lives are functioning, or otherwise the business is going to have the union to come in to compensate. The benefit of the union is it protects the people and it makes sure that it is distributed, but it has extra cost. So the wisest thing to get is the lesson from the leaders of the company to realize that if we go and care about the people and make sure it's a fair exchange, we don't have to add that extra cost into the equation. And if we're not caring about it, we're going to end up them joining together. It's like in a country, if you have a dictatorship or a tyrant going on in a country, you end up having a revolution. And that's the same as like a company that has to level the playing field, to bring equality, economic inequality to equality. So my advice is to go to the top and make sure you're caring about and listening to the people and make sure you're filling those needs, or the unions end up having to mediate that, which is just extra cost. And I think it's also wise to educate and empower the people that are working, because if they stand up, they don't need somebody, a big boy, to come in and stand up for them. So although that may not be what people like to hear, the reality is that it's a mechanism to try to force fair exchange and as much income inequality as possible to make sure you have a sustainable economy. And that's necessary. And if we don't listen to that, then we keep having these lessons. If we create monopolies, unions are going to come about. If we create a fair distribution of economics and a fair job opportunities, we're less likely to have that. During the industrial age, that was very common, but today we're moving forward and more entrepreneurship is coming, privatization is coming.
Nashina Mohammed for Joburg Today.